Kevin Geiger, who is actually staff at Two Rivers Ottauquechee Regional Commission, but he volunteered to be the guinea pig and tell this particular story about a group of towns, again on the Vermont side of the river, that are toying with the idea of trying to get a regional energy coordinator that could serve multiple towns. And I will let Kevin take it from here. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. So hopefully you can all see me and hear me out there. I'm going to briefly run through some things because I'd love to have a little time for questions. Um, so this project started, we wanted to basically have an energy coordinator, and then another person wanted to have an energy coordinator, being Nick Clark over in Thetford. And so he was pushing that idea with towns. At the same time, we weren't so sure. We loved the idea. We weren't so sure towns were ready. And I think Diane hit it on the head, and that towns are and people are a lot more ready than we may think that they are, which is great. So 6 of the 7 towns potentially in that ball game did decide that they wanted to go forward. And those are Stratford, Thetford, Norwich, Sharon, Woodstock, Barnard. Pomfret didn't decide that, but we're looking at maybe another town. And we're going to get together and meet them. There'll be an intermunicipal agreement between all those towns that basically says what that person does. They would actually be a Two Rivers Ottauquechee employee, contract for 1 term, but the towns would kind of have say to us, and then we'd have say to that person. That's the idea out there. The idea is also that there's going to be some metrics around that person, so we just don't end up at the end of the year going, well, what did we accomplish? We're probably going to be looking at money saved, probably looking at carbon, tons of carbon saved, and I imagine things around kilowatt hours if we can out there. We will be developing a job description in the next month or so in concert with those towns. And just to run briefly through what that person is going to do, we think probably a lot of the things that you may have all been doing, educational efforts, building audits, projects, developing metrics and ways to fill up those metrics, and trying to get grants out there. And when I say projects and audits, I don't necessarily mean they're going to be out doing them, because that would be relatively expensive, but they're going to be trying to line them up. So how do you get a contractor to do an audit? How do you, if you have a project that you're going to do an installation job, how do you line that up, get the bid, have the town do it? So that type of thing. And a big question is going to be whether the person works directly only on town things. So, that's the idea, is the town's paying in, and so the town would need some stuff, but they needn't necessarily. So the town might decide, oh, we want you to actually help our citizens, or we want you to help our school, or our library, or our fire department, or whoever. And so I think it'll vary a lot town by town, whether we stay focused just on municipal projects or on community projects, or even potentially on individual projects. Certainly, town buildings are going to be up there in terms of probably number 1 things that we're looking at. Streetlights, if people still need looking at streetlights. Town vehicles, some towns have very few vehicles, some towns have more. The town operations themselves. Electric vehicle charging stations, as Nicole mentioned out there. And I saw a question, we need a lot more electric vehicles, and then a lot more electric vehicles after that. So how are we going to crack that nut? Energy fares and the electric vehicle fare Nicole mentioned. Again, great way to set that type of thing up. Community solar, although right now, we're getting pretty good on electricity. So the generation side has come a long ways. What we're really going to need to crack at is the thermal side, which is the building side, and then the transportation side, the auto side. We see educational activities certainly out there, and facilitating access, because there's a lot of stuff and programs and people, but you may need somebody to boil some of that down and kind of broker the knowledge with the person out there. I do see schools. I think there's a lot of interest in schools, and so I see potentially this person helping the schools as well. Again, back to the state energy goals, which we're very conversant around. Where if you're in Washington Electric region, Washington Electric is 100% renewable. If you're in Green Mountain Power, they're like 70% renewable and getting close to 100%. in the not too distant future. So we love to see continued solar projects out there to meet our regional energy production goals. But the big things are going to be, how do we get electric vehicles out there? How do we do transit, more transit? How do we do more park and rides, carpooling, telecommuting, which we're all going to get very good at in the next year or so. And then how do we work on those buildings, whether it's energy retrofits, those windows. I have one of those windows that Doc did right next to my head in my office, and it's a very nice thing. And I want to thank Dee Gish, if I forgot her back in the beginning, because Dee worked for us. She doesn't anymore, but she was really instrumental in getting us off on the energy foot. And then Tori Littlefield and I are the two staff mainly working on this. And I think that's about my time.
Great, thank you. We have one question, and it is from John from the Vermont Council on Rural Development. He says, this is a great idea. So happy the 6 towns are taking the lead. Do each of the towns have energy committees, and would there be any value to bringing in bringing those volunteer groups together to help support this staff person?
And I'd say the answer is yes. It's interesting, of these 7 towns voting, the only town that didn't really have an energy committee or coordinator was Pomfret, who voted it down. And what the meeting decided was that they want to form an energy committee. So I think they were a little, earlier in the process, and everybody is a little ahead of them. But definitely those people, they have a lot of expertise. They've been plowing this ground a long time. So yeah, they're going to be critically important. Right now, we've asked the select boards to appoint a representative to kind of the formation group, because there'll be a contract with the select boards. But those committees, definitely.
Yes. Anna asks whether there was any reason why it was those particular 6 towns that you started working with, and whether you tried to approach any others, or if it was invite only when you brought those towns together.
Oh no, not at all. Those initial 7 towns were picked by Nick, and mainly because he's from Thetford, and so he was kind of looking for towns that touched Thetford to get this thing out there. And the whole impetus of the idea, of course, was to try to get some paid staff to help all this volunteer. But if additional folks, not my dog, but I'd like a dog, but we are working, for example, in the Rochester Valley with the 5 towns in the Vermont 100 Valley there, and just to try to assist them as we can right now. They're not at the stage where they're funding anybody, but it's out there. As people may know, Hartford has a position fully, so we'll be talking to them as well. And the state, it's interesting, I was talking to the state Buildings and General Services does this type of thing for state buildings, and they're trying to see how they can somehow take their expertise and also bring it down to the town level, which would be very exciting.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I will just add to what Kevin mentioned, that because we work on both sides of the river at Vital Communities, we have been tangentially involved in a project in the North Country of New Hampshire, where Clean Energy New Hampshire has hired, as of I think August or so, a staff member. Her name's Melissa, who is serving this multi-town energy coordinator role for a whole bunch of towns in the North Country, funded with a particular grant from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation Tillotson Fund. That is meant to be at least 1 year, and I think multiple years of work. And she's doing a lot of work mainly to write grants and to help those municipal buildings get energy audits. And I will be making sure that Kevin and the Clean Energy New Hampshire folks get connected and compare notes on what their regional coordinators are doing.